My father tried to destroy my laundromat because I refused to hire my spoiled sister. The call came while I had one hand inside a dryer and the other wrapped around a lukewarm cup of coffee I had forgotten to drink. That was pretty much my life at 26. Lint in my hair, detergent on my shirt, and a constant fear that one broken machine would wipe out whatever money I had managed to save that month. My name is Briar, and I owned a small neighborhood laundromat that looked less impressive than it sounded. People heard business owner and pictured me sitting behind a desk approving things. In reality, I spent most mornings scraping gum out of dryer drums and most nights staring at spreadsheets until the numbers started looking personal. I had worked there since I was 19, when it belonged to an older couple who were ready to retire but emotionally incapable of leaving. They knew every customer by name and every machine by noise. When they finally decided to sell, I used nearly all my savings as a down payment and took out a small business loan for the rest. It was terrifying, but it was mine. I had 2 employees. One handled pickups and deliveries, and the other split the front counter, cleaning and folding with me. We were not some expanding empire. We were 3 tired people keeping washers alive with prayer, basic maintenance, and a repair guy who charged like he had gone to medical school. So when my father called and said, "I need you to put your stepsister on the schedule starting Monday," I honestly thought I had missed part of the conversation. I pulled my arm out of the dryer and said, "What schedule?" "Your schedule, at the laundromat." There was this confidence in his voice like he had already solved a problem and was only calling to tell me where to sign. He didn't ask whether I had an opening. He didn't ask what she could do. He didn't even ask how the business was going. He just decided I would hire his wife's daughter because apparently owning a small business meant I had invented unlimited payroll. My stepsister was 30 and still lived with my father and stepmother. I'm calling her my stepsister because that's technically what she was, but we were never close. We didn't grow up together, and by the time our parents married, we were both adults with our own habits and grudges already fully developed. She had lost one job at a convenience store after taking merchandise without paying and insisting she planned to settle it later. She had lost another office job because she skipped procedures, made a mess of customer records, and blamed the coworker who caught it. Every time something went wrong, there was always a reason that somehow belonged to another person. My father knew all of that. He had complained to me for months about paying her phone bill, covering her groceries, and watching her sleep until noon while he went to work. But he never wanted to be the person who told her to leave, because that would start a fight with my stepmother. So he did what he had always done when a problem made him uncomfortable. He tried to hand it to me. I said, "I don't have a position open." He sighed like I was being difficult on purpose. "Briar, it's a laundromat. You can find something for her to do." That sentence still annoys me. It's a laundromat. As if the place cleaned itself, billed itself, handled angry customers by itself, and paid back the loan with quarters found under a couch. He had never asked what my monthly expenses were. He had never offered to help when one of the large washers flooded the floor, and I spent an entire weekend hauling water with old towels. But suddenly the business was simple enough for him to make staffing decisions. "I can't pay another salary," I said. "There's nothing to find. She doesn't need much. Give her part-time hours. That's still money. You're making this bigger than it is." I leaned against the machine and looked across the room at my employee folding sheets near the front window. She had a kid in middle school and had asked me the week before whether I thought her hours were stable. I had told her yes because, at the time, I believed they were. Hiring my stepsister would either mean spending money I did not have or cutting hours from someone who actually showed up and did the job. Neither option was happening. I tried to explain that. My father didn't care. He started talking about family, which is what people do when the practical argument isn't working. He reminded me that he had helped me buy my first used car when I was in college. He reminded me that I had lived in his house after my mother died. He reminded me of every normal parental thing he had ever done as if each one had been an invoice he had patiently waited to collect. Then he said, "After everything I've done for you, you can't give your own family a chance?" I felt that old familiar pressure behind my eyes. My father could make me feel 12 years old in under a minute. It didn't matter that I paid my own rent, ran a business, and had not asked him for money in years. One disappointed tone, and suddenly I was standing in a kitchen being told I had an attitude. But I was tired, and tired Briar is not diplomatic Briar. I said, "If you believe in her that much, hire her at your company." The silence lasted maybe 2 seconds, but it told me everything. His company was apparently too serious to risk. Mine was not. "That's different," he said. "How?" "I can't just create a position. Neither can I. You own the place." "Yes, which means I'm the person who knows I can't afford it." He called me selfish, then arrogant. Then he said I acted like my little laundry shop was more important than people. I wish I could say I stayed calm. I didn't. I told him that my little laundry shop paid my rent, paid 2 other people, and paid a loan with my name on it. So yes, it mattered more to me than fixing a situation he was too scared to handle in his own house. That was the exact moment the conversation stopped being about employment and became personal. He said, "Maybe people need to know what kind of person runs that place." I asked what that meant. He said, "It means you shouldn't expect family to support your business when you refuse to support family." I had a bad feeling, but I still thought he was bluffing. My father loved threats that made him feel powerful in the moment. Most of them disappeared once he cooled down. So I said the first thing that came into my head, "If you lie about my business and it costs me money, I'll deal with it legally." He laughed once, sharp and ugly. "You'd sue your own father? Don't give me a reason." Then I hung up. For the rest of that day, I kept replaying the call while pretending everything was normal. I smiled at customers. I refilled the vending machine. I showed a college student how to stop overloading a washer after he tried to fit what looked like his entire apartment into one machine. Meanwhile, my chest felt tight and hot. Part of me was furious. Another part felt guilty for being furious. That's the fun thing about being raised by someone who uses guilt as a remote control. Even when you unplug the television, you still hear the clicking. My stepmother called 3 days later. Her voice was careful, which usually meant my father had already told her a version of events designed to make him look wounded. She said, "Your dad told me you threatened to take him to court and go after the house." I actually pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it. "What?" He said you threatened him because he asked for help. "No. He ordered me to hire your daughter, insulted my business, and said he might tell people not to use it." I said if he lied and hurt the business, I'd respond legally. I said nothing about your house. She went quiet. I could hear a television in the background and cabinet doors closing. My father was probably nearby. He had a habit of making phone calls in shared spaces so he could overhear whatever version came back. My stepmother said, "He didn't tell me that part." Of course he didn't. Briar, I don't want this to become a whole family war. It already became one when he threatened the income I used to live. She exhaled and said she would talk to him. I didn't trust that conversation to accomplish much, but I wanted to. My stepmother was not a cruel person. She was just weak in very specific ways, especially when it came to her daughter and my father. She hated conflict so much that she would let it grow mold in a corner rather than clean it up. Still, she sounded genuinely upset, and I let myself believe the matter might end there. A few days passed. Nothing happened. I got busy, which was easy. One dryer started making a sound like a shopping cart rolling downstairs. The pickup van needed a new tire. A customer claimed we had shrunk a sweater that arrived already small enough to fit a toddler. Normal problems. Manageable problems. Then the first bad review appeared. It said the laundromat was filthy, the machines smelled like mildew, and the woman at the counter had been rude when asked for help. I read it twice because I didn't recognize the situation. We kept the place clean. Not perfect, but clean. Every interaction was logged if there was a complaint, especially because I was obsessive about customer service after buying the business. There had been no argument, no refund request, nothing. I replied politely, asking the person to contact me with the date and time of their visit so I could investigate. They never did. The next morning, there were 2 more reviews. One claimed we lost an expensive comforter. Another said our delivery employee returned clothes smelling worse than before. That one made my stomach drop because it attacked a service we had spent months building. Pickup and delivery brought in better margins than self-service, and my employee took real pride in it. He was so offended he pulled up every order from the previous 2 weeks and went through them one by one. "There's no missing comforter," he said, and nobody called about a smell. I know. Do you think it's a competitor? I wanted to say yes, because that would have been less embarrassing. Instead, I said, "I think it might be my father." He stared at me for a second and then looked away. Probably because there is no professional response to your boss saying her dad might be trying to ruin the business. By the end of that week, there were several negative reviews posted from accounts with almost no history. They used different wording, but the complaints felt weirdly similar. Dirty machines, missing clothes, rude staff, overcharging. One claimed we refused service to an elderly woman, which was almost funny because half our regular customers were elderly women and most of them had my personal number. It stopped being funny when 2 scheduled pickup customers canceled. One wrote, "We saw the recent reviews and decided to use someone else." That message hit me harder than I expected. I was sitting at the front counter with a calculator, a pen, and the cheapest dinner I could find from the place across the street. I opened my cash flow sheet and started running numbers. If pickup orders stayed down for a few weeks, I could still make payroll. If it stayed down longer, I would have to delay a repair. If another machine failed during that delay, I might miss a loan payment. I kept changing the numbers like the spreadsheet might eventually apologize and give me a better answer. My other employee noticed before I said anything. She waited until the laundromat was empty and asked, "Are my hours okay?" That question made me want to cry, which was extremely inconvenient because I was standing beside a cart full of wet towels and had no interest in having an emotional breakdown under fluorescent lights. "Your hours are okay," I said. "Are you sure?" "No, but I'm going to make sure." Honest, but not exactly comforting. That night I went home, took a shower, and sat on my bed in the same towel for almost an hour while reading every review again. I clicked each profile. I took screenshots. I wrote down dates, wording, and the exact time they appeared. I compared them to customer records. I even checked security footage because a tiny part of me worried I was being arrogant and the complaints were real. They weren't. Around midnight, I called my stepmother. She answered in a whisper. "Is everything okay?" "No. Someone is posting fake reviews. Customers canceled because of them." She didn't say anything. I said, "I can't prove it's him yet, but he threatened to do this." Her voice changed. Not surprise exactly. More like dread arriving on schedule. "I'll talk to him," she said. "You already said that." I did talk to him. And? He said he was angry and didn't mean it. Well, somebody means it. I heard my own voice getting louder and forced it down. My stepmother had not created the reviews, but I was angry at her too. Angry because she kept standing between problems and pretending that counted as solving them. Angry because her daughter's unemployment had somehow become my emergency. Angry because my father felt entitled to punish me for saying no. She promised she would confront him directly. I told her I needed more than a promise. Then I hung up and immediately felt guilty for snapping at her. 5 minutes later, I felt angry again. That emotional loop became my personality for a while. Over the next few days, I worked like someone trying to outrun a bill. I posted photos of large cleaning orders, offered a small pickup discount, and called regular customers who had not scheduled recently, pretending it was normal outreach instead of mild panic. I also kept documenting everything, every canceled order, every message, every suspicious account. My father did not call me. That silence made it worse. If he had yelled, denied it, or accused me of being dramatic, at least I would have known where I stood. Instead, he went quiet while the reviews kept appearing. My stepmother finally contacted me on a Tuesday afternoon while I was cleaning a soap spill near the change machine. She sent one message: "Call me when you're alone." I went into the storage room and called. She said, "It was him." I closed my eyes. I had expected it. Hearing it still felt like being slapped. She told me they had argued for 2 nights. At first, he denied everything. Then he said maybe one review had been posted because he was upset. Eventually, he admitted creating several profiles. He claimed he only wanted to teach me a lesson and thought I would change my mind about hiring her daughter once business slowed down. I said, he thought if he damaged my income, I'd hire someone I already couldn't afford. I know. It doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense if the point was control. She didn't answer that. Then she told me something even more unbelievable. My father had left the home computer open on the dining room table, not just logged in, but open to multiple email accounts, review profiles, and a document where he had drafted different complaints. One account used a variation of his real name because apparently sabotage did not come with a technical training course. My stepmother had taken photos and a short video showing the open tabs. She sent them to me along with screenshots of the email confirmations. She also texted, clearly and in writing, that she had found everything on the shared computer in their house. I stood in that storage room surrounded by detergent boxes, staring at my phone while my hands shook. Part of me felt relieved because I finally had proof. Another part felt sick because the proof was my father sitting at a computer inventing stories about me, one after another, with enough patience to create accounts and confirm emails. This wasn't one drunk post or one angry comment. He had planned it. He had watched the reviews affect my business and kept going. My stepmother said, "Please don't do anything until I talk to him again." That sentence broke whatever sympathy I had left in that moment. "No," I said. "You had time to talk to him. He used it to hurt me. He could lose a lot if this gets bigger. I'm already losing money. I'm not saying you should do nothing. You are. You're just saying it softly." She started crying. I felt terrible. but I didn't take it back. I was done being the easiest person in the family to disappoint. I spent that night organizing everything into folders: reviews, profile names, screenshots, canceled orders, messages, dates, security logs. I wrote down what my father had said during the original call while I still remembered the wording. I asked both employees to write brief statements confirming the alleged incidents had not happened during their shifts. I reported each review through the platform's process and included the evidence where possible. Then I answered the reviews publicly, calmly, professionally, painfully professionally. I wrote that we could not find any order or visit matching the complaint, that we took service issues seriously, and that I would gladly investigate if the reviewer contacted us with details. I wanted to write, "This is my father having a tantrum because I didn't hire a woman who has already been fired twice." I did not write that. Growth. The legal part was much less dramatic than people imagine. I talked to a local attorney for a brief consultation, showed her the documents, and asked what made sense. She told me not to chase some giant lawsuit because the cost would eat me alive. Instead, she helped me understand what I could reasonably claim in small claims court: the 2 canceled orders, some directly related losses, and other documented costs. Simple, specific, not emotional, even though I was extremely emotional. Filing the claim made me nauseous. I sat in my car outside the courthouse afterward and cried so hard I gave myself a headache. Not because I thought I was wrong, but because I knew my father would treat the filing as the betrayal, not the fake reviews. He would skip over the part where he attacked my livelihood and focus on the part where I refused to absorb it quietly. He called the day he received the notice. I let it ring twice before answering. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he said. "No hello, very efficient." I said, "You posted fake reviews. You're taking your own father to court over internet comments. They cost me customers. You're exaggerating. I have the cancellation messages. You could have talked to me." I laughed. I really did. "I did talk to you. You threatened me during the conversation. He told me my stepmother had invaded his privacy. He called her disloyal. He said I had manipulated her. Then he demanded I withdraw the claim before the family was destroyed over something stupid. The family was apparently not destroyed when he tried to damage my business. It was destroyed when I created paperwork about it. I said, pay for the loss and stop contacting my customers through fake accounts. I'm not paying you a dime. Then don't." He called me cold. I said he raised me. That was childish, but I won't pretend it didn't feel good. After the call, I blocked his number. Then I unblocked it because I worried I might need to save messages as evidence. Then I hated myself for caring. I spent the next hour cleaning the same counter twice because I couldn't focus. The review platform removed some posts quickly and marked others for investigation. Within a couple of weeks, most were gone. A few customers actually mentioned that my responses were the reason they decided to come in. One woman said, "Anybody who answers that calmly is probably not the problem." I almost hugged her. Business didn't snap back instantly, but the bleeding slowed. Pickup orders started returning. My employees relaxed a little. I still checked the review page every morning before getting out of bed, which was not healthy but felt necessary. The court date approached. My father sent one message through my stepmother saying he would never settle because I needed to learn what happens when I embarrass him. A week later, he offered to settle. The amount covered the canceled orders, filing costs, and enough disruption that I could stop spending evenings preparing evidence. The attorney told me it was reasonable. My pride wanted a hearing. My bank account wanted the money. My bank account won. He paid without apologizing. I told myself that was enough. Then I did something stupid. A few friends took me out to dinner after the payment cleared. It was the kind of place with tiny portions, cloth napkins, and prices that made me look at the menu like it had personally offended me. I had 2 drinks, which for me is enough to turn good judgment into a distant relative. We were talking about the case, and one friend joked that my father had technically bought dinner, so I posted a picture. I wrote, "Thanks, Dad, dinner was great," and tagged him. Yes, I know. Petty, immature, completely unnecessary. I could blame the drinks, but the truth is I wanted him to feel embarrassed. He had made me scared in my own business, and for one night I wanted him to be the one staring at a phone with his stomach twisting. The post stayed up for maybe an hour before I deleted it. That was long enough. My stepmother called the next morning and said he had seen it. Apparently he had spent half the night pacing and saying I had humiliated him publicly. She said he kept repeating that he was going to prove I had been wrong about her daughter. I was standing in my kitchen wearing one sock and holding a piece of toast when she told me this. I said, "How exactly is he planning to prove that?" "He says he can get her a position at his company." I almost laughed. Then I remembered our original argument. My father had refused to risk his own workplace when I suggested it. Now, because I had embarrassed him, he was willing to do exactly that. That should have made me feel vindicated. Instead, I felt nervous. Pride had just become an employment strategy, and none of the people involved were known for good decisions. For a while, all I knew was that he had gotten her an interview. My stepmother sent me updates even though I had not asked for them, probably because she needed someone to understand how tense their house had become. My father worked as an administrative coordinator for a regional service company. He had been there for years, supervised part of an operations team, and was reliable in public while being impossible in private. His manager trusted him. That trust turned out to be the most expensive thing he gave away. He told the manager that my stepsister had been unlucky in previous jobs and needed a fresh start. He left out the stolen merchandise. He left out the office records. He described her as eager, organized, and unfairly judged. According to my stepmother, he practiced what he planned to say before the interview and got angry when she suggested he should at least be honest about why her daughter had been fired. "You want her to fail before she starts," he told her. My stepmother told me that line over the phone, then added, "He's acting like this is some test he has to win." "It is," I said. "He just won't admit the test is about me." She didn't disagree. My stepsister got the job. It was entry level, mostly handling customer account adjustments, basic records, and paperwork connected to refunds. My father announced it in the family group chat that I had muted after the court mess. I only saw it because a cousin sent me a screenshot and wrote, "Is this aimed at you?" My father's message said, "Amazing what happens when someone gives a person a chance instead of judging them forever." Subtle as a brick. I didn't respond. I wanted to. I typed 3 different replies, including one that said, "Please keep that energy when she starts taking office supplies home." Then I deleted them. I had already done enough with the dinner post. I was trying to act like an adult, or at least like someone whose bad decisions had a waiting period. For the first couple of weeks, things seemed fine. My stepmother said her daughter came home complaining that the job was boring and the training was too slow, but she went back each day. My father treated every completed shift like proof in a case nobody else was arguing anymore. He told relatives she was doing extremely well. He told my stepmother that management had noticed her potential. She had been there 9 business days. Meanwhile, I was trying to recover my own routine. A repair bill wiped out most of what remained from the settlement. A dryer belt broke. The pickup van developed a leak. One of my employees caught a stomach bug, and I covered 2 of her shifts while also handling the counter. I didn't have time to monitor my father's little victory tour, and honestly, I was relieved. If my stepsister kept the job, maybe he would stop trying to make her my responsibility. That relief lasted about a month. My stepmother called one evening and asked whether companies usually let new employees use someone else's account while they waited for access. I was cooking pasta and almost dropped the spoon. "What do you mean, someone else's account?" She said the system takes too long to approve new logins, so your dad let her use his for a few tasks. I turned off the stove. "That sounds like a terrible idea." "He says it's normal." "Then why are you asking me?" "Because it doesn't sound normal." It wasn't. I had no experience with corporate systems beyond paying bills and dealing with my own point-of-sale software. But even I knew you didn't hand someone your login to anything involving money. My father was not stupid either. He had spent years telling me to protect passwords, lock doors, save receipts, and never trust people who said a rule didn't matter. But this was different because his pride had entered the room, and pride apparently had administrator access. I told my stepmother to stay out of it. That sounds harsh, but I meant it as self-protection. I didn't want another family emergency delivered to my phone. I didn't want to be asked to warn him, rescue him, or later accept blame because I had known something. She said she understood. A week later, she called again. This time her voice was shaking. She said my father and her daughter had both been suspended without pay. I sat down on the floor behind the front counter because my knees actually went weak. The laundromat was closed, and I had been finishing the cash count alone. The overhead lights were off except above the counter, so the whole room looked gray and hollow. "What happened?" I asked. "They're saying there were false refunds." "Who made them?" "I don't know. She says she didn't steal anything. Your dad says his login was used, but he wasn't the one using it." I said nothing for a few seconds. My stepmother started talking faster. The company had found multiple refunds processed to prepaid cards. The amounts were small enough that no single one looked dramatic, but together they formed a pattern. The transactions were made using my father's credentials during times when he claimed he was not at the computer. Her daughter had not yet received full authorization when some of them happened. An internal auditor had asked questions. My father initially said no one else knew his password, then later admitted her daughter had used it for training. That contradiction was apparently a problem. I wish I could say I was shocked. Did she do it? I asked. My stepmother started crying. She says she was fixing customer issues and didn't understand where the refunds were going. That doesn't answer the question. I don't know. Briar. I heard my father in the background asking who she was talking to. Her voice dropped. I have to go. The line ended. I stayed on the floor for a while with the deposit bag beside me and my back against a cabinet. My first feeling was vindication, and I hated that. There was a part of me that wanted to scream. See? This is exactly why I said no. Then fear arrived right behind it, because my father's job paid most of their household expenses. My stepmother worked part-time at a medical office, but her income was nowhere near enough to cover everything. If he lost his position, the damage would not stop with him. Then I got angry at myself for worrying, then guilty for being angry. Again, very emotionally efficient. My father sent me a message 2 days later from a number I didn't recognize. We need to talk. I stared at it, took a screenshot, and blocked the number. The next morning, he came to the laundromat. Of course he did. Why have a private family disaster when you can bring it to a place with customers, spinning machines, and security cameras? He walked in a little after 10 with my stepsister beside him. She had her arms folded and sunglasses pushed on top of her head, even though it was cloudy. My father looked terrible. His shirt was wrinkled, his face was red, and he had the exhausted energy of someone who had been arguing for days and still believed the next argument might save him. My pickup employee was loading bags near the side door. My other employee was helping a customer at the folding tables. 3 people were using machines. I came around the counter and said quietly, "This isn't the place." My father ignored that. "You won't answer your phone," he said. "I blocked you." Exactly. My stepsister rolled her eyes as if my boundaries were creating unnecessary paperwork for everyone. I said, "You need to leave." My father stepped closer to the counter. "We came because this whole situation started with you." There it was. Not even a full minute. I looked at him and honestly wondered whether stress had broken something in his brain. What situation? If you had hired her when I asked, none of this would have happened. He said it loudly enough that one of the customers turned around. My stepsister jumped in. "You made it clear you thought I was trash before I even walked in the door. I said I didn't have a job available. You said I couldn't be trusted." To him? During a conversation where he was ordering me to put you around my cash system and inventory. "So you admit it," she said. I almost laughed because I genuinely did not understand what she thought I was admitting. My father pointed at me. "You told me to hire her at my company." I did. Now they're acting like I committed some major violation because I tried to help her get trained. I said, "Did you give her your password?" His face changed. Just a flicker, but enough. That isn't the point. That is absolutely the point. She needed access to do the work they hired her to do. Then they should have given her access. The approval process was delayed. So you broke the rule. He slapped his hand on the counter. Not hard enough to damage anything, but hard enough to make the customer at the nearest washer look over again. My employee at the folding table started walking toward us. I gave her a small shake of my head because I did not want her dragged into it. My father lowered his voice, but it only made him sound more intense. "I need you to confirm that you told me she was capable of working." I stared at him. "I never said that. You told me to give her a job. I told you that if you believed in her so much, you should take the risk instead of forcing it on me." "That's the same thing." "No, it isn't." My stepsister said, "You knew he would do it." "I knew he wouldn't do it. That was the point." That landed badly. My father's jaw tightened, and my stepsister looked at him like I had exposed something she had suspected but didn't want confirmed. My stepmother rushed in a minute later, breathing hard. She had apparently realized where they were going and followed in her car. She went straight to my father and said, "I told you not to come here." He said, "Stay out of it." She laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "My daughter is suspended and you may lose your job. I'm already in it." My stepsister snapped at her mother for taking my side. I wasn't even aware there were sides left. The facts seemed pretty simple. Someone had processed fake refunds, my father had handed over his credentials, and neither of those things had happened inside my laundromat. I told all 3 of them to leave. My father kept talking. He said the company needed context. He said I could explain that he had only been trying to help because I refused. He said if I wrote a statement, his manager might understand the pressure he was under. "The pressure you were under?" I repeated. "Yes, you created this entire conflict." That was when I lost whatever calm I had left. I said, "I didn't hire her. I didn't give her your password. I didn't process fake refunds. I didn't lie to your manager. The only thing I did was refuse to let you dump this on my business, and you were so desperate to prove me wrong that you dumped it on your own job instead. The laundromat had gone strangely quiet, even though every machine was still running. People were pretending not to listen with the concentration of professional spies. My father said, "You're enjoying this." For one ugly second, I wanted to say yes. I wanted him to know there had been moments when I felt satisfied that reality had finally answered him. But his face looked older than it had a month earlier, and my stepmother was crying beside the detergent vending machine. And suddenly there was nothing enjoyable about any of it. "I'm not," I said, "but I'm not taking responsibility for it either." My stepsister called me a selfish bitch. My employee near the side door took one step forward and said, "You need to leave." I appreciated him more in that moment than I can explain. My father looked around as if he had only just realized other people were present. His embarrassment turned straight into anger. He told me I would never get anything from him again. No support, no inheritance, no relationship. He said it like he was revoking a membership I had been begging to keep. I opened the front door and said, "Leave." My stepmother guided her daughter out first. My father paused beside me and said, "One day you'll understand what you did to this family." I said, "I understand exactly what I refused to do." He left. I locked the door behind them even though it was still business hours. My employee turned the sign to closed for a few minutes and nobody argued. One customer quietly asked whether she should finish her cycle. I told her yes and apologized. She patted my arm and said, "Honey, my sister threw a ham at me during Thanksgiving. Families are awful." I laughed so suddenly I started crying. I went into the bathroom, sat on the closed toilet, and covered my face with both hands. I was embarrassed, furious, relieved they were gone, ashamed that my employees had watched my father blame me for a financial investigation. I also kept thinking about the dinner post. If I hadn't mocked him, would he still have hired her? Maybe. Maybe not. That question bothered me for months. I knew the post had not made him share his password. It had not made my stepsister process refunds. Still, I had thrown gasoline near a man who lived for proving a point. That didn't make the fire my fault, but it did mean I had been reckless. I could admit that without accepting the rest. The company's investigation lasted several more weeks. I learned pieces through my stepmother, who called late at night when my father was asleep or out meeting with an employment attorney. She said the audit had found a pattern of refunds directed to a group of prepaid cards. Some were linked through purchase records and account activity to her daughter. The company also recovered messages in which my father told her daughter to use his login just until yours works, and reminded her to close the screen if anyone walked by. That last part destroyed his claim that he thought the arrangement was allowed. He had also changed his story more than once. First, nobody had his password. Then his stepdaughter had watched him type it. Then he had permitted her to use it for one task. Finally, when shown the messages, he admitted she had used it repeatedly, but insisted he never imagined she would issue false refunds. I believed that part. My father was controlling and proud, but I did not believe he planned the theft. He wanted to show everyone that he could turn her into a success story. He gave her access because rules felt less important than winning. Then, when the first problem appeared, he lied because the truth made him look foolish. The company fired him for sharing credentials, bypassing access procedures, lying during the investigation, and trying to minimize what had happened after the first suspicious transaction was flagged. He had worked there for more than 15 years. My stepmother called me right after he came home with a box of personal items. She whispered, "It's over." I was wiping down a table. I stopped and looked through the front window at cars moving past in the rain. Did they fire her too? Yes. What happens now? I don't know. Her daughter's situation moved outside the company after that. The total amount was more than I expected, but not some movie-level fortune. It was enough to be serious, enough that repayment mattered, but small enough that the final outcome stayed painfully ordinary. There were interviews, an attorney, a court date months later. She eventually accepted an agreement that required her to repay the money in monthly installments and complete a period of probation. She did not go to jail. She did end up with a record that made any future job involving money, customer accounts, or financial systems much harder to get. My father was not charged with taking the money, but losing his job was its own disaster. His health insurance ended after a short continuation period. He lost the annual bonus he had counted on for property taxes and home repairs. He kept the retirement money that was already legally his, but he lost future employer contributions and the stable salary he had expected to carry him toward retirement. He blamed the company first, then the auditor, then my stepmother's daughter, then me, almost never himself. The first real crack in their marriage came over money. My father wanted to use most of their joint savings to cover the mortgage while he looked for work and to help my stepsister make the first restitution payments. My stepmother refused. She said they needed the savings for basic expenses and that her daughter had to be responsible for at least part of what she had done. My father told her she had raised her daughter to expect rescue. She told him he had spent years pretending the problem belonged to her until he needed the girl to prove something about me. That argument lasted so long the neighbors heard it through the walls. My stepmother told me later that she had never seen him look at her with that much resentment. I wanted to say they were both right, which is not a useful thing to say to someone crying on the phone. Her daughter kept insisting the refunds had started as a misunderstanding. Then she said everybody at the company bent rules. Then she said my father should have supervised her better. Every version placed responsibility somewhere nearby without letting it fully touch her. My stepmother finally told her she had to move out. That did not happen quietly. My stepsister accused her mother of choosing a husband over her, which was almost impressive considering that marriage was also collapsing. She packed some clothes, left other things scattered across the bedroom, and moved in with a friend who agreed to let her sleep on a couch. Before leaving, she told my stepmother, "Briar got exactly what she wanted." When my stepmother repeated that to me, I felt anger first, then something closer to exhaustion. "I wanted her not to work for me," I said. "That was literally all I wanted." "I know. Do you?" She went quiet. That was unfair of me. She had given me the proof that saved my business. She had also spent years protecting her daughter from consequences and my father from discomfort, and I was still angry about that. Both things were true. Families love forcing you to hold two opposite feelings until your hands cramp. A few weeks later, she told my father she wanted a separation. She had already spoken to a lawyer and figured out what she could afford. He accused her of abandoning him when he needed support. She said she had supported him through every stage except the one where he took responsibility. He stayed in the house while the legal process began because neither of them could afford a sudden move. They slept in different rooms and communicated mostly through short messages about bills. My stepmother picked up extra hours at the medical office. My father applied for jobs that paid less than his old one and complained that companies were unfairly judging him over one mistake. One mistake. That phrase did a lot of work for him. It covered the password, the lies, the fake reviews, the threats, and the scene in my laundromat. Apparently, if several decisions were connected by the same ego, they counted as one. I did not speak to him during that time. He tried calling from another number, then sent a message through a social media account I rarely used. It said, "I know things got out of hand. People make mistakes. We're still family, and maybe when emotions settle down we can talk like adults." I read it at least 10 times. Not because it was moving, but because I kept looking for an apology hidden between the sentences. There wasn't one. "Things got out of hand" made it sound like weather. "People make mistakes" spread responsibility around the room. "When emotions settle down" suggested the real obstacle was my reaction. I typed a long response, deleted it, typed another, deleted that too. Then I wrote, "It's too late and it's too little. You didn't lose your job because I refused to hire her. You lost it because you broke rules and lied. You tried to hurt my business when I said no, and you still haven't apologized for that. I don't want contact." My thumb hovered over the send button for a full minute. Then I sent it and blocked the account. I cried afterward. Not dramatic movie crying, just quiet. Annoying tears while I sat on the edge of my bed still wearing my work clothes. Cutting off a parent does not feel powerful when you are doing it. It feels like admitting the version of them you kept waiting for is probably not coming. The laundromat recovered slowly, which was fitting because nothing in my life ever repaired itself in one clean scene. Pickup orders returned. A couple of customers who had left came back after seeing the false reviews disappear. My employees stayed. I gave each of them a small raise months later, not because I had suddenly become successful, but because they had stood beside me through the ugliest part and deserved more than a nervous promise about stable hours. The loan kept getting paid, some months barely, some months with enough left over that I could breathe. I replaced the dryer that sounded like it was dying, repainted the front wall, and added a bench near the folding tables. Tiny improvements. Nothing impressive enough for my father, probably, but customers noticed. My stepmother and I stayed in occasional contact. We never became close in the way people might expect after sharing evidence and family collapse. Too much had happened, and some of it sat between us without a neat conversation. She had helped me, but she had also asked me to wait while he hurt me. I cared about her, but I did not trust her with every part of my life. She eventually moved into a small apartment after the separation agreement was finalized. My father kept the house for the time being and took a lower-paying administrative job in another industry. He had fewer benefits, no supervisory title, and a long commute. According to my stepmother, he told relatives he had been forced out by office politics. Nobody mentioned the password unless they wanted an argument. My stepsister moved from her friend's couch into a rented room and worked temporary jobs that did not involve handling payments. She made the restitution installments because missing them would create more trouble, not because she suddenly understood what she had done. She still told people the company had overreacted and the family had failed her. For a while, I checked her public posts even though I knew it made me feel worse. I told myself I was making sure she was not talking about the laundromat. Really, I wanted to know whether she ever admitted fault. She didn't. I stopped looking after I caught myself reading comments at 2 in the morning with my jaw clenched. That was not research. That was self-harm with a scroll button. About a year after the original phone call, my stepmother came into the laundromat while I was replacing price labels on a machine. She looked lighter somehow. Not happy exactly, but less braced for impact. She brought coffee and sat on the new bench. She told me my father had asked about me. I said, "What did you tell him?" "That you're working. That's all." "Good." She nodded. Then she apologized. Not for him. For herself. She said she had spent years trying to keep peace by asking the most reasonable person to absorb more. Her daughter would explode. My father would punish, and I would usually pull away and handle things alone. So when conflict came, she pressured me because I was the person most likely to survive it without destroying the room. That wasn't fair, she said. I wanted to give her a graceful response, something warm and forgiving. Instead, I said, "No, it wasn't." She accepted that. We drank coffee while machines turned behind us. She asked whether I was dating anyone. I told her absolutely not, because I already had enough unstable relationships and at least the washers came with manuals. She laughed. I did too. Before leaving, she said she hoped my father and I might speak again someday. I said, "I don't." That hurt her, but she did not argue. The truth is, I had imagined a final confrontation more times than I want to admit. In some versions, he came into the laundromat and gave a perfect apology. In others, I listed every cruel thing he had done while he stood there speechless. Sometimes I imagined him seeing the business busy and finally respecting it. Those scenes were satisfying because I controlled both sides of the conversation. Real life never gave me one. What I got instead was ordinary distance. No dramatic reunion, no final screaming match, just blocked numbers, separate holidays, and fewer updates as time passed. I also had to live with my own part. The dinner post was cruel. It did not cause his choices, but I posted it because I wanted to hurt him, and it worked. For months, I tried to decide whether admitting that meant I had to forgive everything else. It didn't. I could regret one thing without turning his behavior into my responsibility. That distinction took me longer to understand than it should have. The business is still small. I still clean lint traps. I still panic when a machine makes a new sound. I still have nights when I look at the account balance and wonder why I ever thought ownership sounded glamorous. But the place pays its bills, my employees know their jobs are not bargaining chips in a family argument, and nobody gets added to the schedule because my father decides it would make his home life easier. A customer asked me recently whether I plan to open a second location. I laughed so hard she looked concerned. Maybe someday. Not soon. My father once said I acted like the laundromat was something important. He meant it as an insult, like caring about a modest life was proof that I lacked ambition. He never understood that small things become important when they are built out of your own time, debt, fear, and stubbornness. I don't need him to understand it now. The loan is mine. The keys are mine. The mistakes I make here are mine too. That is not a perfect ending, and honestly, I'm glad. Perfect endings usually mean somebody skipped the uncomfortable part. I still have days when I miss my father. I miss the version of him who taught me to change a tire, brought soup when I was sick, and called every year on my mother's birthday, because he knew that day was hard. Those memories did not disappear when he became someone I had to block. They just stopped being enough. So no, we did not reconcile. My stepsister did not transform into a grateful, responsible person. My stepmother did not become my new best friend. My father did not stand outside the laundromat in the rain begging forgiveness. He went on with a smaller job and a story in which everyone had treated him unfairly. My stepsister went on making payments and explaining herself. My stepmother built a quieter life. I kept opening the laundromat every morning. That is what happened after all the shouting ended. The doors still needed unlocking. The machines still needed cleaning. Customers still forgot socks in the dryers. Life kept being ordinary, which was exactly what my father had tried to take from me when he decided my little laundry shop was expendable. It wasn't.